Well, hey, good morning. My name is Aaron Nesbitt. I'm one of the pastors here at River Oaks, and I'm excited to be with you today as we continue on in our marriage series, For Better or Worse. We're in week 3, and we're talking through the different aspects of marriage and the biblical principles that we should follow in our marriages. And so 2 truths that we've laid as the foundation in this series are that we believe that marriage has been instituted by God. And we believe that it is a lifelong monogamous relationship between a man and a woman. And so in this series, we've been talking through marriage, and marriage is something that impacts each and every person in this room. Whether you yourself are married, you hope to be married someday, or you even just know somebody who is married. Because understanding these principles not only help you live out your marriage better, helps you go into marriage with proper expectations, but it also helps you even give advice to other Christians on the biblical principles that should be playing out in their marriage. And so in this series, in week 1, we talked about the model of marriage, the what is marriage. Then in week 2, we talked about the why of marriage, the mission of marriage, that we're supposed to be changed and challenged to become more like Jesus from our spouse. And this week, we're going to be talking about the main ingredient of marriage, the how. How does it look to be married? And so all of us, at some point in our life, you've probably had a food dish where the main ingredient was missing. Right? Maybe, so if you think about this, you think like a peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the peanut butter is really just a donut. Like, it's not the same. If it's missing the main ingredient, it's just not the same. And what's even worse, if it doesn't have the main ingredient, is when someone tries to substitute something else for that main ingredient. Whether you're just trying to be creative and try things out, or you're trying to make something healthier. One example that comes to mind, a couple years back, we had been, eating a lot of sweets. It was like during COVID and all of that. We'd been eating a lot of sweets, and we decided, let's keep eating sweets, but let's try to make them a little healthier. And so we did this with brownies. And so we had switched out and substituted some ingredients to try to make these brownies healthier. We put the ingredients in the pan. They fill the pan. It looks like brownies. We put it in the oven. They come out. They smell like brownies. Take a bite. It did not taste like brownies. Substitutes are never as good as the real thing. And the same goes for our marriage. Nothing is good as the main ingredient in marriage. And the main ingredient in marriage is love. And you're thinking, well, duh. Like every fairy tale I've ever read, every pop song I've ever heard, every romantic comedy I've ever watched could have told me that. But love, what is love? It's a word that we use for so many different things in our life. I love a lot of things. I love that first sip of coffee in the morning and every sip that follows. I love road trips. I love the adventure of a road trip, the stopping at a gas station, buying a bunch of junk, and going and turning on music and having conversations, and just the adventure that is a road trip. I love the Green Bay Packers. I have since I was a little kid. I don't even know how and when it started. I just know that I love them and I root for them. I love a good medium-cooked steak covered in grilled onions and mushrooms. And I love my wife. You see what I'm talking about here? We love a lot of things, and at surface value, it sounds like I love all those things the same. But no. My wife towers above all of those other things. But we use love for all of those. See, in the English language, I feel like we've kind of muddied the waters of love a little bit by doing that. Other languages give kind of more of a distinct word for love and the different aspects of it. In Greek, there's multiple words for love. Here's a couple of them. So there's storge. Storge is familial love. It's like the love that a parent has for a child, that you have in a family. It's a community-based love. and it's one that kind of comes naturally to you. There's a philia love. It's a friendship, a brotherly love, a companion love. There's an eros love, a passionate love, a desire, the one that makes your heart just go pitter-patter for someone else. It's a chemistry between someone else. It's a sexual love. But there's a fourth kind of love. There's an agape love. An agape love is the main ingredient of a biblical marriage. It cannot be absent, and it cannot be substituted. If two people were to build their relationship on any other type of love than agape love, they are building on a faulty foundation. It will not last. But yet, we still continue to do this. Marriages start off with the wrong kind of love as their foundation. People choose to get married because they love each other, but their love is often one of the first three types of love. So here's three different couples. Couple number one. This is a couple that gets married with eros love kind of as the foundation. They saw each other and they just went wild for each other. They're like, you are my one. You get me going. It just makes sense. And so there's this chemistry, there's this passion that burns between them. And they say, I'm going to choose you. Let's get married. Let's get hitched. And they get married, and it's great. It starts off awesome. The honeymoon phase is riding well, and the rose-colored lenses that they're looking at each other with are just incredible. They're infatuated with each other. But the honeymoon phase ends up ending, and their chemistry begins to dissolve. They recognize that, sex isn't solving life's problems anymore, and they can't stand each other. Those relationships don't tend to last very long. There's couple number two, a couple that has kind of chose philia as their main foundation for their relationship. They're good friends. They're like, it just makes sense. We like all the same things. Life is going to be easy. We'll do all the same things, have the same hobbies, do all the same activities. We're going to be best of buds. We're going to be partners. And so that's what they are. They go through life doing activities, never getting deeper in their intimacy or love for one another, but being preoccupied with things. Then there's couple number three, the storge couple. The couple that builds on this foundation of a storge love. They look at marriage and they just kind of find themselves in it because that's just what you do, right? You find someone, you get married, you buy a house, you get a golden doodle, you have 1.94 children. You live the dream. You build a legacy. You see, this couple just looks at the other person as a piece of the puzzle of their expectations and their dream. This couple, they pour their life into building this community, this legacy, this dream. They go to all the games. They go to all the sporting events. They pour into their children. What happens is the children end up flying the nest. And then it's just mama bird and papa bird. And they take a look at each other and they just don't even know who the other person is because their focus has just been on the family. Those couples have a couple different options. They got three of them. A, we can choose to dive in deep and put a foundation of agape in. We can just get a divorce, or we can just live two separate lives. No foundation can substitute an agape love in a biblical marriage. The main ingredient is agape love. Now, don't get me wrong. Those other types of love should play out in a marriage. There should be eros. There should be philia. There should be a storge. In fact, agape is just going to enhance each of those. Talk about storge, to be everyone on the same page, to understand that we are all Christ-centered and we're in this together. And we're going to all become more devoted followers of Christ, loving one another along the way. It doesn't get much better than that. or philia, when you're looking at your spouse and you're holding each other accountable to grow into your redeemed potential. That's a beautiful thing. And eros, agape paired with eros, is going to create such a trusting and loving environment, one there's no abandonment or judgment. It's a beautiful thing. All of it should be there. But agape should be the main ingredient. See, agape is a Greek word, but it wasn't used in the Greek society very often. In fact, it was a very special word. It was a word used for a parent that had a special love for a child, like a favorite child, a child maybe that almost was lost. And so this word wasn't used very often in the Greek culture, but it was used a lot in the New Testament, which was written in Greek. It was the type of love that God used to describe the love that we are to have for him and for one another. And this agape love, this unconditional love, was so unique because it was so different than anything else people were experiencing. It's so different than the love that we hear about in songs or see in the movies. Agape love is based on action. It's not based on feelings. When the Bible speaks of love, it measures it primarily not by how much you want to receive it, but by how much you are willing to give of yourself to someone else. It was a love that said, you before me. And in our flesh, and our natural instinct is not to put someone else before ourselves. It's to put us first. I saw this play out in a funny way when Kelsey and I were first dating. I was working at a Ponderosa. Maybe you guys know what those are. It's a buffet. They're extinct. They might even be they're either endangered or they're extinct. I don't know if there's any around anymore. But it was a buffet, and I was working there. And Kelsey would come to see me and visit me. And one time when I was on my break, she was out and she was eating and she had a plate. And I took it upon myself. I don't know why. I don't know if I was just testing boundaries or what I was doing. But I saw a roll on her plate that she wasn't giving much attention to. So I grabbed that roll and I go to put it in my mouth. And she, like a ninja, just goes and just rips it right out of my hand. And that's when I realized she loves bread, especially in roll form. I mean, we were at a buffet, like 10 feet away, there's a whole mountain of rolls. Like, it was funny. But our natural instinct is to put us before someone else. And that's a funny, silly little illustration. But in a marriage, it plays out in pretty serious ways. We're called to put our spouse before ourselves. A sacrificial love willing to put one's own needs and desires aside for the well-being of someone else. It's an unconditional love. To the world, marriage is a consumer contract, but to the Christian, it's a covenant commitment. A contract is a legally binding agreement between two parties, usually with the intention of exchanging goods or services in return for payment or other benefits. We deal with contracts all the time. And with contracts, there's a buyout, there's a way out. You can figure around it and look in the small fine print and figure a way out of it. You know, we deal with it with like our phones. If we're not having good service and we don't like it, we'll buy it out. We'll go take our service somewhere else. We'll get someone else. If we're in a lease for a vehicle, we know it's only a matter of time till we get a new model. The world looks at marriage the same thing. They think of it as this idea of, I'm not getting my services met, I'll just get a new model. I'll just go to a different carrier. This saying kind of sums up the idea of a contract marriage. Marriage is ideal until there is an ordeal, and then it's time to get a new deal. On the other hand, a covenant is an agreement, a promise between two parties before God, based on trust and faithfulness. This is on full display when you've been to a Christian wedding ceremony and the exchanging of vows. It's a covenant between two people to love, honor, and cherish one another, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health. It is not merely a legal contract, but a spiritual covenant that goes far beyond any legal obligations that one has to another. But when we think about our wedding day, it's kind of a blur, right? Like there's a lot going on. And wedding vows just kind of seem like a piece to the whole day. You know, and you're standing up there, you're watching your bride come down, or you're seeing your groom up at the front of the room, and you're looking at each other, and you get together, and you're just staring into each other's eyes. You exchange rings, you say your vows, you're thinking about that night and the party and all the other things. It can feel like it's just a declaration of a present love. But what's happening, it's a promise of a future love. You're promising to love them through all the seasons that are to come. See, the person that you marry isn't the same person that you're married to 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years later. People change over time. And they are different in different seasons. And in a way, if you're not intentional, if you're not paying attention, they can almost kind of become a stranger. But when two followers of Christ get married, you are committing to love one another through every stage, through every season. My wife and I, we've been married for what will be 14 years this year. And I recognize that there are couples in here that have been married much longer than us. But we have been married long enough to see each other change. We've been married long enough to go through some different seasons in our life. A season of being young and single, a season of college and graduate school, a season as newlyweds, and becoming parents through trials and health scares, through healing from past hurts, losing loved ones. And Lord willing, we have seasons that are going to come, the coming and going of friendships, teenage years for our kids, becoming empty nesters, becoming in-laws and grandparents. The joys, the stresses, the obstacles, the griefs, all of life's milestones will impact and change your spouse over time. And you are called to agape them through it all. Paul gives us an example of what this agape love should look like as he writes to the Corinthians. And these same ideas are meant for the marriage. He says this in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. And the word here, you've heard this passage many times. The word that's used for love is agape in the Greek. And so we're going to read it with that in mind. It says, agape love is patient and kind. Agape love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Agape love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Agape love never ends. More than likely, you've heard that during a wedding ceremony at some point in your life. It sets the tone for how agape love is supposed to play out in the life of a Christian, and especially how it's supposed to play out in a marriage between two Christians. It should be applied to the person that we are connected to, the person that we stood before God with and made a covenant with. So this passage gives us an understanding of what that looks like. It says what agape is. It says agape is patient. Agape is patient. Patient is, when you see your spouse going through the same cycles over and over and over again, but being patient with them through it. For us, that looks a lot of different ways. One way is, I'm not very good with dates on my personal calendar. And so I will ask Kelsey multiple times when something is, and she generally is patient with me in that. Agape is kind. Even when it doesn't even make sense, even when in the middle of an argument and someone's heated, it's being kind to them. And what's amazing is when someone is just like up here and all of a sudden someone's kind to them, it almost just deflates them. They don't know how to handle it. But agape love is kind. Agape rejoices in the truth. Agape protects. And men, this doesn't just mean physically or financially. It means emotionally and spiritually. It means looking out for your spouse in all of those areas. Agape is hopeful. It's looking to the future with expectation with your spouse, not a question mark. Agape is trusting. Agape is enduring. Agape endures a cancer diagnosis, health or family crisis. Agape can endure. Agape is perseverance. It's continuing on and pushing through whatever comes its way. Not only does that passage give us what agape is, but it also tells us what agape is not. Agape is not envious. You know what they say about a relationship? They say opposites attract, right? Well, when opposites attract, that means they've got something that you don't have. And so they have strengths that you don't have. And so you can't look to your spouse and be envious of what they have and you don't. Maybe they're more creative. Maybe they're more social. Maybe they're more organized. Agape is not envious. It looks at your spouse and it says, a win for you is a win for me. Agape is not boastful. Just like your spouse might have strengths, they also might have weaknesses compared to you. It's not boasting in your strengths compared to them. You know, maybe you're a morning person. You're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but your spouse isn't up until about 10. It's not being boastful in that and thinking that you are better than them. Agape is not arrogant, rude, or selfish. And really, all those kind of go together, hand in hand. Don't talk down to one another. Don't put your wants above the other's needs. Agape is not irritable. I like that one. I like irritable because it's like not this massive anger. It's saying don't even be irritable. Like, you know when you don't get enough sleep or you get a little hangry? Just that little bit of irritable. Don't even do that. Agape is not irritable. Agape is not resentful. It's not keeping track or keeping score of the wrongdoings of one another. You know, it's interesting. Oftentimes when you look at a couple and we meet with them, only one of them is really doing it. They're just keeping track of all the score of all the wrongdoings of the other one, and the other one has no clue they're even playing a game. Agape does not keep score and be resentful. Agape is not rejoiceful in wrongdoing. So we see in this passage what agape is and what agape is not. And when you look at that passage, you know, we're called to look like that. If we put that passage up and put blanks there where agape love is, and we put our name in, if you were to read that passage with your name in those blanks on your own strength, you're not going to do that without cringing a little bit or lying. We miss the mark, but that is what we are called to do. On our own, we can't do this. We can't understand this agape love on our own, and we can't show what we don't know. But we've been shown this agape love in the most incredible way. John 3:16, a verse that we all know really well, we've heard many times, uses that word for love is actually agape as well. It reads this, it says, "For God so agape the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." It was in God's sacrificial and unconditional love for us that he sent his son, Jesus, to live a perfect life and to die a sacrificial life for you and for me on the cross. You see, if we were to take that passage, and we can put Jesus' name there. He did it all. He was our example of what to do. Jesus is patient and kind. Jesus does not envy or boast. Jesus is not arrogant or rude. Jesus does not insist on his own way. Jesus is not irritable or resentful. Jesus does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Jesus bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. He is our example of agape love. Because he died for us, we can die to ourselves and live for our spouse. John 15, 12 through 13, Jesus actually commands us. We get commanded to live this out. It says, this is my commandment. Love, agape each other in the same way I have loved, agape you. There is no greater agape than to lay down one's life for one's friends. We're commanded to love one another this way. Not just our spouse, but everyone, especially our spouse. What's funny is that's a commandment. A commandment to love. So we know that love's not a feeling from what we talked about earlier, because you can't command a feeling, right? Like if I go to my toddler who's throwing a tantrum and I say, be happy, like that's not going to happen. But you can command an action. And that's what he's doing here. And that action does lead to feeling. When we act in agape, feelings follow. It's just not the front of the focus. There's a story of how that plays out. There's a woman, and she decided she wanted a divorce. She had just had it. She was done with her husband. And so she calls up her lawyer, and she says, I want a divorce. But not only do I want a divorce, I want to make it hurt so bad. What can I do? And the lawyer says, you know what, I've got exactly an idea of how we can make this hurt. And what you need to do is you need to lift him up so high that it hurts even more when he falls. And so do everything right. Love him well, care for him well, and then pull the rug out from under him in about 6 months. So she does this. She goes and she loves him well. She puts him before herself, and she does all that was told to her. And 7 months go by, and the lawyer calls her and he says, hey, you missed your appointment. Aren't you still wanting to divorce him? She says, divorce him? What are you talking about? I love him more than I ever have. See, agape is to put someone else before you. And when you do that, when you pour and you invest into that person, your feelings follow. We are commanded to agape love like Christ loved us, sacrificially, unconditionally. And we've read through the passage of 1 Corinthians a lot, and I just love the way that it ends. It says, love endures all things. Love never ends. For followers of Christ, we can endure all things. We can never end in our relationship. For better or worse, with money, without money, with wrinkles, without wrinkles, with cancer, without cancer, with depression, without depression, with addiction, without addiction. You see, nothing is irreconcilable, especially between two followers of Christ, because we weren't irreconcilable to God. While we were sinners and had nothing to offer, he reconciled us to him. And he calls us to have that same love for our spouse. It's possible to make good on our covenant commitment to one another, no matter the circumstances and the difficulty. You know, we mentioned those three couples at the beginning. There's a fourth couple as well. There's a fourth couple, and this couple has put the main ingredient of a biblical marriage into play. They built on agape love. This is what that looks like. A married couple who had been through thick and thin, including health crisis, financial struggles, and family drama. They have learned to put each other first and to support each other no matter what. They have a spiritual connection that transcends their physical bodies and a commitment to each other that goes beyond words. That is what we are called to. That is the marriage we are meant to have as Christians. An unconditional, sacrificial love that plays out over time. It's not enough just to not get divorced. We're supposed to fully lean in and love one another through it all till the end. As we wrap up the marriage portion of this series, I have two challenges for you, for those that are married. I want you to revisit your vows. For some of you, that might be going into the archives. You might be having to blow off the dust, break out the VCR and watch it, break out a DVD. But watch or read the words, the promise that you made to one another. If you don't have your vows, you don't know, go find vows that you think were probably pretty similar and read those. What you'll see and what you'll hear is there was no asterisk. There was no okay, I want to try this out for 5 to 10 years and we'll revisit this and see how it's working. No, it's for better or for worse, till death do us part. I want you to revisit those vows and think about this, because your marriage impacts everyone around you. It impacts your children, your family, your friends, your neighbors. When they look to you as two followers of Christ that are made a covenant commitment to one another, they're looking to see Jesus in that relationship. There's too much at play to give up. And you might be thinking, man, you don't understand. It's been rough. The last 10 years have been awful. Don't let it be for nothing. Keep pushing forward. And the second challenge is, after you've read those vows and you've recognized that promise that you've made to one another, look your spouse in the eye and say, I agape you. I choose you. You can do this. You can do this because Christ died for you. He died a sacrificial death. Because of that, you can die to yourself. And you can live for your spouse. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you. We thank you for the love that you have for us. And this love is such a unique and special love. A love that we really honestly don't deserve. We thank you for loving us in a way and then challenging us to love others in that way as well. I pray that we can do that better as we leave here today. That we can understand this amazing agape love that you have for us, and that we can share that love with our spouses in incredible ways. That we can rely on you and trust you and hope for what you have in store for future. We love you. We thank you. And we pray all this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.